Now we've talked a little bit about vocabulary, let's talk about grammar, grammatical range and accuracy, and the 25% of your mark that comes from that band descriptor category. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about identifying the question, in particular the grammar in the question, and how we can use it to deliver an accurate response. So, listening for grammar. As we've seen, thinking about the examiner's choice of vocabulary is very important. So we can use that vocabulary to help us give a strong start. This is equally true of the examiner's grammar. It's really important to pay attention to the examiner's grammar. Now notice the difference between these two questions. Do you enjoy traveling? Have you done much traveling recently? Now, you can see that each of these questions has been given in a different tense. The first one model answer that I'm going to put up on the screen here using the verbs that I write down on the screen in their appropriate form. So you've got to think about the tense that the verbs should appear in. Now the question is, did you enjoy your time at school? And the answer we have here, you can see on the screen. Now I want you to fill in the gaps of this answer using these verbs here in the appropriate form. So, yes, I did. Did you enjoy your time at school? Did you enjoy? Yes, I did. My teachers were fantastic. So we're using the be verb in the past form for a plural subject, so we have it as were. My teachers were fantastic, really helpful, and I had. So we're moving have to the past. Everything here is in the past because we're talking about school and the question is in the past. And I had a lot of enthusiasm for my subjects. Looking back, I feel grateful. Now you may have tripped up on this one, understandable, we'll look at that in a moment. I feel grateful that I went to a school where students and teachers respected one another. So, as I mentioned, this verb feel is very important here. We've actually deliberately used this verb feel so that we can bring in grammatical range. So for grammatical accuracy, we respond to the question in the appropriate tense, and for grammatical range, because that's what it's all about, it's grammatical range and accuracy, the band descriptor title, we need to look for opportunities to include a different tense, but in an appropriate time. So it's appropriate to say I feel grateful because that's the feeling right now. To be honest, in the past, often kids are not grateful about the school they go to. They just think of it as school and they have to go in. But when you're an adult in the present moment, you feel grateful that that happened, past tense, to you. So here we have the past simple as expected from us in the question, but we've also found an opportunity to increase grammatical range by adding the present simple. Now, let's look into this in a bit more detail. You can think of this as time travel, if you want to be a little bit mystical about it. So sometimes changing tenses is the natural and obvious approach, such as with this question here. Have you ever been to an art gallery? Now, you may want to answer this one yourself, just for a moment, before you have a look at my answer, which is going to come up on the screen now. Yes, I have. I've been to a few. I last wasn't perfect to answer the initial yes/no question, so identifying the question and using the grammar from it to get started in our response. We then naturally move into the past simple. It's quite a natural progression here. It'd be a bit strange to stay in the present perfect to offer a bit more detail. But notice that we've also found an opportunity to include the past continuous too. The gallery was running. That takes a little bit more thought and consideration. Let's keep going. So another question here. Other times you may need to think outside the box for an opportunity to include another tense, or two, or even three. Of course, it's usually just going to be one or opportunity to bring in more tenses. Now let's have a look at my answer. Oh, it's hard to say. I like lots of different genres of music. Rock, classical, hip-hop, pop. I used to listen to country, but I'm not really a fan of that anymore. Right now, I'm listening to a lot of classical music. So here, again, we've identified the question which uses the present simple. We use the present simple to open present simple and saying, I like this, but I don't like this. That's fine, but it's not going to demonstrate your grammatical range. Notice that the present continuous here, that may look a little bit strange to you. I'm listening to a lot of classical music, because it usually means right at this moment, and of course you wouldn't be doing that in the exam. But we often use this to talk about a period which may change in the near future. So again, that temporary state. So I'm listening to a lot of classical music now, but maybe in a Now let's look at some possible dangers or risks that could arise when we use this strategy. You need to be careful to avoid changing tenses at inappropriate times or in an inaccurate way. These are the two have one particular friend or a group of friends. Again, you might consider how you would answer this question. Now let's look at my response. Personally, I prefer to have one friend. I used to have had loads of friends, but we weren't very close, and that was tiring. Now I have just a couple of really good friends, which has been much better. Hopefully you've noticed a couple of problems with this answer. Now the first problem is a problem of inaccuracy. The used to form here is inaccurate. It should be I used to have loads of friends, not I used to have had. And the other problem so instead of which has been much better, we should be saying which is much better. Yes, the present simple is a little bit simpler than the present perfect, but it's still appropriate. It's not about the complexity all the time, it's about how appropriate a tense is. Okay, let's talk about the most common mistake that I hear when students try this. And that is that candidates will often use the present tense when they're being asked a question about the past. Has your fashion changed since you were a child? Now you can see this one's a little bit trickier because you've got that present perfect mixed up with the past simple. But have a go with this one again. When you've finished, listen to my answer, which I'm going to play you now. Yes, I think it has changed. When I was young, I always wear baggy jeans and bright and colourful t-shirts. But these days I am wearing more form-fitting clothes with muted colours. Now, as you can see, hopefully, there are a couple of problems with this answer. Problems that are very, very typical of both of these problems are related to tense, and they use the same verb. How would you fix them? What do you think the correction should be here? It should be, I always wore. Not I am wearing. Should be I wear. Okay, so this is the most common mistake that comes up. So when you are asked a question that has an element of the past about it, I want a little signal to go off in your brain that says, be careful not to use the present at an inappropriate time. Okay, you got to stay in the past unless it's appropriate to move out of it. A little bit of practice for you before we finish up. Here's a question where you should be able to use what we've learnt. Remember, the first thing to do is identify the tense. Make sure you open your response in that tense and then see if you can bring in one or two other tenses. So a great question to practice this is this one. Has anyone ever taught you to dance? So try answering this now. Lessons. Having said that, I was just dancing last week at my friend's wedding, though I'm a terrible dancer as my balance is awful. Okay, so what tenses am I using here? Notice we're identifying the question, we're using the present perfect, and so therefore that's what's going to appear at the beginning here. No, they haven't. I don't think I've ever had. Okay, now let's bring in a couple more tenses. We're going to use the past continuous, I was dancing, and we're going to bring in the present simple. I'm a terrible dancer, my balance is awful. So try using this strategy of identifying the grammatical accuracy.